My parents left me in a Category 4 hurricane, and now they're homeless. But if you had watched your own parents drive away while the sky turned black, the wind began tearing through the neighborhood, and they left you behind with 3 terrified pets, would you ever forgive them? Would you still call them family? My name is Naomi Carter, and I was only 19 when my parents made that choice. They told me they were evacuating for safety. They promised they would come back. But they boarded up the windows, cut the power, locked the door, and drove away without me. For hours, I fought the storm alone. What they didn't know was that surviving that night would change everything. Years later, when their own lives came crashing down, they came looking for the daughter they had abandoned. And by then, I was no longer waiting for them to come back. If you had asked me 6 weeks before that hurricane whether my parents would ever leave me behind, I would have laughed at the question. I knew their flaws, of course. I knew my mother could be controlling, and I knew my father had a habit of making decisions without asking anyone else. But they were still my parents. I believed that meant something. I was 29 then, living in a quiet coastal neighborhood in Florida and working from home as a cybersecurity analyst. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Every morning, I made coffee, opened my laptop, and listened to the soft clicking of my keyboard while the rest of the house slowly woke up. And then there were my 3 animals. Cooper, my golden retriever, followed me from room to room like a shadow. Milo, my little Shih Tzu, barked at everything from delivery trucks to falling leaves. And Luna, my tabby cat, had the remarkable ability to appear beside me whenever I was having a bad day. They weren't just pets to me. They were family. My parents never quite understood that. Naomi, they're animals. My mother would say whenever she saw me buying another bag of premium dog food. I would smile and tell her, I know, Mom. That's why they depend on me. What I didn't understand back then was how much my family depended on me too. I had always been the responsible one. When my father needed help paying an unexpected medical bill, he called me. When my mother needed someone to drive her to an appointment, she called me. When my younger brother Tyler ran out of money 3 days before payday, somehow my phone would ring. Tyler was 25 and had mastered the art of making every problem someone else's problem. He changed jobs constantly. He spent money faster than he earned it. And whenever he made a mistake, my parents somehow found a reason to explain it away. He's young, my mother would tell me. He'll figure it out, my father would say. I was only a few years older than Tyler, but somehow I had never been allowed to be young. When I was 22, I once told my mother I couldn't lend Tyler another $500. She looked at me for a long moment and said, Naomi, you're the responsible one. At the time, I took that as a compliment. I didn't realize it was becoming my role. The responsible one. The dependable one. The daughter who would always answer the phone. The daughter who would always come back. The daughter who would always fix things. And maybe that's why, when hurricane season arrived that year, nobody questioned who would be left behind. The first warning came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed with a weather alert. I glanced at the screen, expecting another routine tropical storm warning. Instead, I saw a large red banner. The storm had strengthened rapidly. I called my father downstairs. Dad, you need to see this. He walked into the kitchen, looked at my phone, and shrugged. Storms change direction all the time. I wanted to believe him, but something in my stomach told me this one was different. By Wednesday evening, the news was talking about possible major hurricane conditions. Grocery stores were emptying. Gas stations had lines around the block. People were boarding windows and loading cars. I started preparing. Water, batteries, flashlights, pet food, medicine, first aid supplies. I even wrote our names and phone numbers on the animals' identification tags and placed their carriers near the stairs. My father watched me move through the house and smiled. You always over-prepare. Maybe, I said. But I'd rather have too much than not enough. My mother laughed from the kitchen. That's our Naomi. I remember that sentence clearly. That's our Naomi. It sounded affectionate. It sounded proud. I didn't know that within days, those words would mean something very different. That evening, I gathered everyone around the kitchen table. We need an evacuation plan, I said. If they issue an order, we're leaving early. Tyler barely looked up from his phone. My father said, We'll figure it out. Figure what out? The evacuation. Okay, I said. How? He looked at me like I was making something complicated. We'll take the SUV. I looked toward the driveway. All of us? My father hesitated. It was only a second. But I noticed. Of course, my mother said quickly. I nodded. And just like that, I stopped worrying. Because I believed them. That was my mistake. I thought the people who had spent my entire life telling me that family comes first would remember that rule when the storm came. I didn't know yet that when the hurricane finally arrived, my parents would make a very different calculation. And in that calculation, I would be the one they decided could be left behind. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise to the sound of rain tapping against my bedroom window. It wasn't the violent rain they were predicting yet, just a steady, uncomfortable tapping that seemed to say, "Get ready." I walked downstairs and found my father standing in front of the television. The weather map had changed. The storm was no longer expected to weaken. It had intensified overnight. Category 4. That number didn't feel real when I first heard it. It was just a number on a screen, surrounded by red and orange bands stretching across the coast. Then the emergency alert came through. Mandatory evacuation. I turned toward my father. "Dad, we need to leave." He didn't answer immediately. My mother was already in the kitchen, staring at her phone. Tyler walked in a few minutes later, rubbing his eyes. "So we're leaving?" My father nodded. "Yes, we're leaving this afternoon." Relief washed over me. For the first time in 2 days, I felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. I spent the next several hours packing. I put food and water into bags. I packed the animals' medication, their records, blankets, leashes, carriers, and enough food to last at least a week. I kept checking on Cooper because he could sense something was wrong. He followed me everywhere. Every time I walked into another room, he was behind me. Milo was different. He was nervous. He kept pacing between the kitchen and the hallway, barking whenever the wind became louder. Luna disappeared underneath my bed. I crawled down and gently called her name. "It's okay, Luna. We're leaving soon." She looked at me with those wide green eyes, and I remember whispering, "I promise." I believed that promise. I thought I was promising her we would all leave together. Around noon, my father came into my room. "We're changing plans." I stopped folding clothes. "What do you mean?" He wouldn't look directly at me. "Your mother and I are going to leave earlier." I stared at him. "Okay, I'll get the animals ready." He shook his head. "No." That one word made the room feel strangely quiet. "No, we're taking the SUV." "I know. There's only enough room for us and Tyler." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because I thought I had misunderstood him. "Dad, we have a second car. Your mother's car isn't reliable." "Then I'll take mine." He rubbed his forehead. "Naomi, it's complicated." "No, it isn't." I pointed toward the hallway. 3 animals. Me. My car. You and Mom take the SUV. Tyler comes with you. Problem solved. My father looked at me. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I stood there staring at him. I wasn't making anything harder. I was asking why my life suddenly didn't fit into the evacuation plan. My mother appeared in the doorway. "Naomi, listen to your father." I turned toward her. "Mom, what exactly are you asking me to do?" She hesitated. Then she said, "Stay here for a little while." I felt my chest tighten. "Stay here. Just until the worst passes." I looked at the windows. The wind was already getting stronger. "Mom, this is a Category 4 hurricane." "I know. Then why would I stay?" She didn't answer. Instead, she said, "Your father and I need to get Tyler somewhere safe." There it was. The sentence that explained everything. They needed to get Tyler somewhere safe. And apparently, they had decided that I didn't need the same thing. I looked at my father. "You're really leaving me here?" He sighed. "You're an adult, Naomi." I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So is Tyler." My father said nothing. My mother stepped closer. "You're capable. You've always been the strong one." That sentence hurt more than anything else. Because suddenly I understood what being the responsible daughter meant. It meant when everyone else needed protection, I was expected to provide it. Even when I needed protection myself. I looked at Cooper. He was sitting beside me. Milo was trembling near the doorway. Luna was still hiding upstairs. I pointed toward them. "What about them?" My mother sighed. "Naomi, they're animals." I felt something inside me break. "They're my responsibility." "You'll be fine," she said. I stared at her. "Will I?" She didn't answer. My father picked up his keys. "We're leaving in 20 minutes." I followed them downstairs. For the next 20 minutes, I moved through the house in a daze. My mother packed clothes. My father checked the fuel level. Tyler carried 2 bags to the SUV. Nobody asked me if I was okay. Nobody offered another solution. Nobody even apologized. At the front door, my mother hugged me. It was quick, almost mechanical. "Lock the doors," she whispered. I pulled back. "Mom." She looked at me. "Please don't do this." For 1 second, I thought she might change her mind. Instead, she kissed my forehead. "You'll be okay." Then she walked away. My father paused beside the SUV. He looked at me through the open driver's door. "Keep your phone charged." That was it. Then he got inside. Tyler rolled down the window. I expected him to say something. Anything. Instead, he looked at Cooper standing behind me and laughed. "Guess you're the babysitter now." The SUV pulled away. I stood in the driveway watching the taillights disappear. The first gust of hurricane wind pushed my hair across my face. I didn't move. I just stood there, because I still couldn't accept what had happened. My parents had actually left. They had chosen to protect themselves and my brother. And they had left me behind. I went inside and locked the door. Then I called my mother. No answer. I called my father. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. That's when the first emergency siren sounded in the distance. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for my parents to come back. I was waiting for the hurricane to arrive. The first thing I did was check the locks. Front door. Back door. Garage. Every window. I checked them twice because my hands were shaking so badly the first time I couldn't tell whether the deadbolt had actually clicked. Outside, the wind was getting louder. Not loud like a thunderstorm. Loud like something enormous was moving toward the house. I called my mother again. Still nothing. Then I called my father. Voicemail. I sent one message. "Please call me. I need to know where you are." The message showed as delivered. No response. I put my phone in my pocket and looked around the living room. A few hours earlier, this house had felt ordinary. Now every room looked different. The furniture seemed too light. The windows seemed too thin. And the walls that had always made me feel safe suddenly felt like they were only pretending. Cooper walked over and pressed his body against my leg. "It's okay," I whispered. I wasn't sure whether I was talking to him or myself. I gathered all 3 animals into the hallway because it was the most protected part of the house. I brought blankets, water, food, flashlights, a battery-powered radio, my emergency bag. Then I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and listened. The rain intensified. Within an hour, the windows were rattling. The lights flickered once, twice. Then everything went black. I froze. The air conditioner stopped. The refrigerator went silent. The house suddenly became so quiet that I could hear the animals breathing. Then the wind hit. The entire house shook. Milo started barking. Luna scrambled out from beneath the bed and ran straight toward me. I pulled all 3 animals close. "Stay with me." Another gust slammed into the house. Something crashed outside. I jumped up and looked through the window. I couldn't see much through the rain, but I could hear branches snapping. Then something hit the side of the house hard enough to make me scream. Cooper barked. I grabbed the flashlight and moved toward the hallway. That's when I noticed water. It was coming underneath the back door. At first, it was only a thin line. Then another. Then suddenly the floor was wet. I grabbed towels and started pushing them against the door. I knew it wouldn't stop the storm. I just needed to slow it down. For the next hour, I moved constantly. Towels. Buckets. Animals. Windows. Back to the hallway. Then the roof started leaking. I looked up and saw water dripping from the ceiling. My heart sank. The hurricane hadn't even reached its strongest point yet. I grabbed my phone. 1 bar. I called my father again. Nothing. I called my mother. Nothing. Then my phone rang. For half a second, I felt relief. It wasn't my parents. It was an emergency alert. Shelter in place. Do not travel. Conditions are life-threatening. I stared at the screen. I was alone. No car outside. No family. No neighbor I could safely reach. Just me, 3 animals, and a house being attacked from every direction. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. If this house failed, nobody knew exactly where I was. I had no one coming. I had no backup plan. So I made one. I took the animals into the smallest interior room downstairs. I dragged a mattress across the floor. I put the emergency supplies beside it. Then I wrapped Luna in a towel because she was shaking so badly. Milo climbed into my lap. Cooper lay across my feet. I sat there with all 3 of them pressed against me while the hurricane screamed outside. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Maybe an hour. Maybe 3. Time stopped making sense. The wind became a continuous roar. Every few minutes, something struck the house. I could hear glass breaking somewhere outside. Then I heard a much deeper sound. A cracking sound. I looked toward the ceiling. The house shook again. And then I heard my mother's voice in my head. "You'll be okay." I wanted to believe her. But I was beginning to understand that being okay was no longer something I could simply wait for. I had to make it happen myself. Around midnight, I heard a loud crash from the kitchen. Cooper jumped up. I grabbed the flashlight and slowly opened the hallway door. The kitchen window had shattered. Rain was blowing inside. I could see broken glass scattered across the floor. I backed away immediately. There was nothing I could do about that room anymore. So I closed the door and returned to the animals. Then my phone buzzed. One new message. My father's name appeared on the screen. My heart jumped. I opened it. It was only 6 words. "We're safe. Don't worry about us." I stared at those words for several seconds. Then I typed, "What about me?" I waited. Nothing. I sent another. "Dad, please answer me." Nothing. I called. No answer. I sat there holding the phone while the storm continued tearing through everything outside. And something changed inside me. Until that moment, I had been waiting for my parents to come back. Waiting for them to realize they had made a mistake. Waiting for them to say they were sorry. But sitting there in the darkness, with 3 frightened animals depending entirely on me, I finally understood the truth. They weren't coming back. So I stopped waiting. I stood up. I checked every door again. I secured what I could. I moved the animals farther from the windows. And then I sat down beside them and made myself a promise. If that hurricane wanted to take everything from me, it was going to have to fight me for it. Because my parents had already abandoned me. I wasn't going to abandon myself too. By the time the sun finally came up, I wasn't sure whether I had survived the night or simply reached another part of it. The hurricane was still raging, but the wind had changed. It no longer sounded like one continuous scream. Now it came in violent bursts, each one making the walls groan and the windows shudder. I hadn't slept. None of us had. Cooper was lying beside me, exhausted. Milo was curled against my stomach, and Luna had disappeared beneath the mattress again. I reached for my phone. The battery was at 12%. There were 3 missed calls. All from my mother. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I called her back. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Naomi." Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Mom, where are you?" "We're safe." "I know." "Where?" There was a pause. "At a hotel inland." I closed my eyes. A hotel. They had electricity. They had air conditioning. They had food. And I was sitting on the floor of a dark house with water coming through the walls. "Did you know the storm was going to get this bad?" "We knew it was serious." "Then why did you leave me?" Silence. I could hear voices in the background. My father's voice. Tyler's voice. People talking. Normal sounds. The kind of sounds that shouldn't have existed while I was listening to my own roof creak. My mother finally said, "We thought you could handle it." I almost laughed. "Because I'm the responsible one?" "Naomi, don't start." "Don't start." My voice cracked. "You left me here. We told you to evacuate earlier." "No. You told me to stay." She went quiet. I looked at Cooper. He was staring at me. I lowered my voice. "You left me here with 3 animals during a Category 4 hurricane." My mother sighed. "We had to make a decision. I waited. And you decided I was the one who could be sacrificed." She didn't answer. That silence was my answer. Then my father took the phone. "Naomi, we're going to talk about this when the storm passes." "When the storm passes?" "Yes." I looked toward the broken kitchen window. "Will you come back?" Another pause. Then he said, "We'll see what the roads look like." I understood. They weren't promising anything. They were leaving the door open, so they wouldn't have to feel guilty. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay what?" "I understand." I hung up. For the first time since they had left, I didn't cry. I just sat there. And something inside me became very still. The storm wasn't over. But the part of me that kept expecting my parents to rescue me was. A few hours later, the wind finally began to weaken. Not completely, but enough that I could hear other sounds. Generators. Sirens. Distant voices. I waited another hour before opening the front door. The neighborhood looked like a different place. Trees were down across the road. Power lines hung dangerously low. Pieces of roofs and fences were scattered across yards. My neighbor's porch had partially collapsed. I stood there holding Cooper's leash, staring at the destruction. Then I looked back at my house. It was damaged, but standing. We were standing. All four of us. I pulled the animals close. We made it. And that's when I heard someone shouting, "Naomi!" I looked across the street. It was Mrs. Alvarez, an older neighbor who had lived there for more than 20 years. She was standing beside her damaged garage. "You stayed?" I nodded. "With the animals." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she walked over and hugged me. "Your parents left?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She understood. Her expression changed. "They left you here?" I nodded again. She shook her head. "Some people don't deserve the word family." That sentence stayed with me, because I had spent my entire life believing family was something permanent, something you couldn't lose, something that survived every argument, every mistake, every disappointment. But that hurricane taught me something different. Sometimes the people who share your blood can still be the ones who leave you when you need them most. The recovery took weeks. The power came back after several days. The water was restored later. My roof needed repairs. The kitchen window had to be replaced. The backyard looked like a battlefield. But I wasn't thinking about the house. I was thinking about what came next. My parents eventually returned. Not to apologize. Not to help. They came back because they wanted to collect their things. My mother walked through the damaged house and immediately started complaining. "The furniture is ruined. The carpet needs replacing. The insurance should cover this." I stood in the hallway listening. Then she looked at me. "You should probably move somewhere else until everything is fixed." I stared at her. "Why?" "It'll be easier for everyone." Everyone. That word almost made me smile. "Mom, whose house is this?" She frowned. "Yours." "Exactly." She looked away. My father began loading their belongings into the SUV. Tyler carried boxes. Nobody mentioned the hurricane. Nobody mentioned leaving me. Nobody apologized. When they were almost finished, I stopped my father at the front door. "Dad." He turned. "Are you ever going to admit what you did?" His face hardened. "We survived a hurricane, Naomi. Everyone was under pressure. You left me. We thought you'd be safe. You knew I wasn't." He didn't answer. I nodded slowly. That was enough. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't beg them to understand. I simply watched them leave. And this time, when the SUV disappeared down the road, I didn't stand in the driveway hoping they would turn around. I went back inside. I looked at the broken window, the damaged walls, the scattered furniture. Then I looked at Cooper, Milo, and Luna. They had stayed with me. They had trusted me. And I realized something. I had spent years trying to prove to my parents that I was worth protecting. The hurricane had finally shown me that I didn't need their permission to protect myself. I just needed to stop waiting for them to do it. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the hurricane had already taken the worst thing it could take from me, the belief that my parents would protect me. I was wrong, because the storm left behind something I hadn't expected. A mountain of bills. The roof repairs alone cost more than I had sitting in my savings account. The kitchen window had to be replaced. Several rooms had water damage, and the backyard fence was almost completely gone. I started working longer hours. During the day, I did my job from the corner of the dining room because my office was being repaired. At night, I filled out insurance forms, called contractors, cleaned mud from the floor, and took care of the animals. There was nobody coming to help, so I stopped expecting anyone to. For the first time in my life, I began making decisions without asking my parents what they thought. And strangely enough, I became stronger. I changed the locks. I repaired the damaged doors. I rebuilt the fence. I replaced what could be replaced and let go of what couldn't. Every small repair felt like I was rebuilding more than a house. I was rebuilding myself. 3 months after the hurricane, my mother called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Hello, Naomi, honey." Her voice was warm again. That old voice. The voice that used to make me forget every argument. "We've been thinking about you." I looked around my living room. The new windows were finally installed. The walls had been repainted. Cooper was sleeping on the rug. Milo was curled beside him. Luna was sitting on the windowsill, watching birds outside. "I've been thinking about you too," I said. "We wanted to ask you something." Of course they did. "What?" There was a pause. "Your father lost his job." I closed my eyes. "Okay. And we're having some financial problems." I didn't say anything. My mother continued. The hotel expenses after the hurricane were much higher than we expected. Then your father's company cut his position. I looked down at my hands. For a moment, the old instinct came rushing back. Fix it. Help them. Be the responsible daughter. Then I remembered sitting on that hallway floor while the hurricane tried to tear the house apart. I remembered calling my father. I remembered his 6 words. We're safe. Don't worry about us. I asked quietly, what do you need? My mother hesitated. We need somewhere to stay. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because life has a strange sense of timing. You need somewhere to stay? Just temporarily. There was that word again. Temporarily. The same word they had used before. But this time, I knew exactly what it could mean. How long? Maybe a few months. I looked toward the hallway. My home was peaceful now. Mine. No shouting. No arguments. No guilt. No one deciding that my safety mattered less than someone else's. I took a breath. Mom, I can't. The silence on the phone was immediate. What do you mean? I can't let you stay here. Naomi, we're your parents. I know. After everything we've done for you? I stared at the ceiling. That sentence told me everything. They weren't asking for help. They were reminding me of a debt they believed I owed. Mom, I said gently, you already showed me what happens when I depend on family to protect me. Her voice became colder. This isn't about the hurricane. It is for me. You've changed. Yes. I didn't apologize for it. I had to. She hung up. I thought that would be the last of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, my father called. Then my mother again. Then Tyler. Each conversation sounded different, but the message was always the same. They needed help. And I was supposed to be the person who provided it. Tyler eventually said something that made me realize how little they understood. You have a whole house, Naomi. I looked around. Yes. You could at least let Mom and Dad stay. I could. So why won't you? Because I had learned the difference between having space and giving someone access to my life. But I didn't say that. I simply told him. Because I don't want to. He went silent. Nobody in my family was used to hearing those words from me. I don't want to. No explanation. No apology. No excuse. Just a boundary. Then winter came. And my parents' situation became worse. They had burned through their savings. My father's unemployment benefits were ending. My mother started selling furniture. Then their landlord gave them notice. The calls became more desperate. One night, my mother left me a voicemail. Her voice sounded completely different. No anger. No authority. Just exhaustion. Naomi, please call me. I listened to it 3 times. I didn't call. Not because I wanted them to suffer. Because I knew if I stepped back into the role they had assigned me, I would lose myself again. A week later, I heard through a relative that they had nowhere to go. They were sleeping in their car. My parents. The same people who had driven away from me while a Category 4 hurricane approached. Now they were homeless. And suddenly, everyone expected me to save them. My aunt called first. Naomi, they're your parents. I looked out my window. Snow was beginning to fall. I know. You can't just abandon them. I almost smiled at the irony. I didn't abandon them. My aunt went quiet. They abandoned me. She had nothing to say. For the first time, someone in my family finally understood. But I still wasn't prepared for what happened next. Because 3 days later, there was a knock on my front door. I looked through the window. And there they were. My mother. My father. Standing on my porch with 2 suitcases beside them. They looked tired. Cold. Older than I remembered. My father raised his hand and knocked again. And I stood there on the other side of the door, staring at the 2 people who had once driven away from me when I needed them most. Now they were standing outside my home, needing me. And this time, I was the one deciding whether the door would open. I stood there for several seconds, watching my parents through the glass. My mother had her arms wrapped around herself. My father was holding the handle of one of the suitcases. Neither of them looked like the people I remembered from that hurricane. Back then, they had driven away with a full tank of gas, warm clothes, food, and a hotel waiting for them. Now they were standing on my porch with everything they owned packed into 2 bags. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. I opened the door, but I didn't step aside. Why are you here? My mother looked at me. Because we have nowhere else to go. There was no excuse this time. No storm. No emergency evacuation. No medical crisis. Just consequences. My father lowered his eyes. We've been staying in the car. I swallowed. I had imagined this moment many times. Sometimes I imagined myself slamming the door. Sometimes I imagined telling them exactly what they had done. But standing there, looking at my father shivering in the cold, I realized revenge wasn't what I wanted. I wanted accountability. "Come inside," I said. My mother immediately started crying. But I held up my hand. Not to move in. Her face changed. "Naomi, you can come inside and warm up. You can eat. You can use the bathroom. But you're not moving into my house." My father nodded slowly. "That's fair." My mother looked at him. "Fair?" He looked back at her. "Yes, Carol. It's fair." That was the first time my father had defended me in years. I stepped aside. They came in. My mother walked slowly into the living room and looked around. The house had changed since the hurricane. New curtains. New furniture. Fresh paint. The damaged places were gone. But I had deliberately kept one thing. A small crack in the wooden frame beside the hallway. I could have replaced it. I chose not to. It reminded me, not of the storm, of the night I learned I could survive without them. My mother noticed it. "You never fixed that?" "I could have." She touched the damaged wood. "Why didn't you?" I looked at her. "Because I wanted to remember." She pulled her hand away. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then my father sat down. "I'm sorry." I froze. My mother looked at him. He continued. "Naomi, I should have taken you with us." I didn't answer. "I should never have left you there." His voice cracked. "I was scared. I made the wrong choice." I looked at him. "Why did you choose Tyler?" He stared at the floor. "I don't know." That answer hurt more than an excuse would have. Because sometimes the truth isn't complicated. Sometimes people hurt you because they make a selfish choice. That's all. My mother sat beside him. "We thought you'd manage." "I did." She looked at me. "But we shouldn't have made you." I felt tears forming in my eyes. I hadn't expected an apology. And I certainly hadn't expected it to matter. But it did. Not enough to erase anything. Enough to let me breathe. I made them dinner that night. Nothing fancy. Soup. Bread. Tea. My mother ate quietly. My father kept looking around the kitchen. Finally, he said, "This place feels different." "It is different." "Because of the hurricane?" I shook my head. "Because of what happened after it." They stayed for 2 hours. Then I gave them a list of local shelters, temporary housing programs, and places that offered assistance to displaced families. My mother stared at the paper. "You've already researched all this?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked at her. "Because I won't abandon you." She started crying again. "But I also won't rescue you." That distinction changed everything. They didn't sleep in my house that night. I drove them to a temporary shelter myself. Before they got out of the car, my father turned toward me. "You really are strong." I almost smiled. I had to become strong. He nodded. Then he said something I'll never forget. "We taught you that strength meant handling everything alone." I looked at him. "Maybe." He lowered his voice. "But we were wrong." I watched them walk inside. My mother turned around once. I waved. Then I drove home. For the first time, helping my parents didn't feel like surrender. Because I had helped them without giving them control over me. And that was the difference. Over the next few months, their lives slowly stabilized. My father found part-time work. My mother started working at a local bakery. They eventually rented a tiny apartment. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't the life they had before. But it was theirs. And something unexpected happened. They started respecting my boundaries. My mother called before visiting. My father asked before borrowing anything. Tyler stopped calling me for money. And I realized that sometimes people don't understand your boundaries until you finally enforce them. But the biggest change wasn't in them. It was in me. I stopped feeling guilty every time I said no. I stopped measuring my worth by how much I could sacrifice. And I stopped confusing being needed with being loved. One evening, months later, my mother called. "Naomi." "Yes." "Your father and I want to ask you something." "What is it?" She hesitated. "Would you come to dinner?" I smiled. "Sure. At our place." I paused. "Your place?" She laughed softly. "Our place." I smiled again. "Okay, Mom. I'll come." And as I hung up, I realized something. My parents had lost their house. They had lost their money. They had lost the comfortable life they once took for granted. But somewhere along the way, they had finally learned something I had learned during the hurricane. A home isn't just a roof. And family isn't the person who expects you to save them. Family is the person who respects you enough to let you save yourself. And that's what I learned from the hurricane. Sometimes surviving the storm isn't the hardest part. It's learning who you can trust after the skies clear. My parents lost their home, but I lost something too, the need to earn their love by sacrificing myself. I still love them, but now I understand that love needs boundaries. And if you've ever been the person everyone depends on, I hope you remember this. You can love your family without losing yourself. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if you want more emotional family stories like this one, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.